The man walked onto the stage and spoke about a promise his dying son made. Simon Cowell couldn't find words. And all he could do was stand up. The cameras were rolling live. America's Got Talent. The Dolby Theater in Los Angeles packed with 2,000 people. Simon Cowell sat at the judge's desk in his usual position, arms crossed, that familiar expression of skeptical anticipation on his face. Next to him, Howie Mandel, Heidi Klum, and Sofia Vergara waited for the next act. Host Terry Crews stepped forward with his trademark energy. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next contestant." A man walked onto the stage. Late 50s. Gray hair. Simple button-down shirt and dress pants. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed talent show. He carried himself with quiet dignity, but his eyes carried the unmistakable weight of profound loss. In his hand he held a small framed photograph. The audience applauded politely, settling back into their seats, expecting the usual introduction. Terry approached him with a warm smile. "Welcome to America's Got Talent. What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Robert Mitchell," the man said, his voice steady but soft. "I'm from Portland, Oregon. And what will you be doing for us today, Robert?" Robert looked down at the photograph in his hands. He was silent for a long moment. When he looked back up, his eyes were glistening. "I'm not here to sing or dance," Robert said quietly. "I'm here because of a promise. A promise my son made before he died." The theater went completely still. Simon's arms uncrossed. He leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from skepticism to intense focus. Cameras were live when the man on stage spoke about his dying son's promise, and Simon Cowell couldn't find any words and all he could do was stand up. Terry Crews stopped moving. His smile faded into something gentler, more reverent. I'm so sorry for your loss, Robert. Would you like to tell us about your son?" Robert nodded, gripping the photograph tighter. "His name was Daniel. He was 23 years old. He died 6 months ago from leukemia." A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. People shifted in their seats. Hands reached for tissues. Simon remained perfectly still, his eyes locked on Robert. "Daniel loved this show," Robert continued, his voice beginning to crack. "He watched every season. Every episode. Even when he was in the hospital, hooked up to machines, too weak to sit up, he made the nurses prop an iPad on his bed so he could watch America's Got Talent." Heidi Klum's hand went to her mouth. Sofia Vergara's eyes filled with tears. "He had a favorite act from 3 years ago," Robert said. "A dancer who had overcome cancer. Daniel watched that performance probably 50 times. And he told me." Robert stopped, composing himself. "He told me that if he didn't make it, he wanted me to come here. He wanted me to stand on this stage and tell you something." "Tell us what?" Simon's voice cut through the silence. Not harsh. Not critical. Just human. Robert looked directly at Simon. "He wanted me to tell you that you gave him hope." Simon's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the desk. "You," Robert continued, pointing at Simon with the hand not holding the photograph. "The judge everyone thinks is mean. The one who says no. The one who crushes dreams. My son said you were his favorite because you told the truth. Because when you said yes to someone, it meant something. It was real." The audience was silent. 2,000 people barely breathing. "When Daniel was in the hospital," Robert said, tears now streaming freely down his face, "going through his 3rd round of chemotherapy, feeling like his body was betraying him, feeling like he had no control over anything, he'd watch this show. And he'd watch you give someone a golden buzzer. And he'd say, 'Dad, if Simon Cowell believes in that person, then miracles are still possible.'" Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. Simon Cowell stood up. Not the casual standing he sometimes did during performances. This was different. Abrupt. Urgent. His chair scraped backward loudly in the silent theater. The other judges looked at him, startled. Howie reached out instinctively, as if to steady him. But Simon was already moving, stepping out from behind the judge's desk and walking toward the stage. The audience gasped. The cameras scrambled to follow him. Terry Crews stepped back, understanding something profound was happening. Simon stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up at Robert Mitchell, who stood there holding his son's photograph, tears on his face, vulnerable and strong at the same time. "Robert," Simon said, his voice rougher than usual. "What was the promise?" Robert took a shaky breath. 2 weeks before Daniel died, he was lucid for about an hour. The doctors said he didn't have much time left. He called me to his bedside and he made me promise 3 things. What were they? First, he made me promise to donate his organs so someone else could live. We did that. His heart saved a 15-year-old girl in Seattle. His kidneys gave a father of 3 in California his life back. The audience erupted in applause. Not celebratory applause, reverent, emotional applause. Simon raised his hand gently, asking for silence. The theater quieted immediately. What was the second promise? Simon asked. He made me promise to tell his mother every single day that he loved her. That he didn't blame her for the genetic mutation that caused his leukemia. That she gave him a beautiful life. Robert's voice broke completely. I've kept that promise. Every morning. Every night. I tell her. Sofia Vergara was openly crying now. Heidi had her arm around her. Howie's eyes were red and glistening. And the third promise? Simon's voice was barely above a whisper. Robert looked down at the photograph in his hands. He held it up so the cameras could see. A young man with a bright smile, wearing a hospital gown, giving a thumbs up to whoever was taking the picture. He made me promise that I would come to this show. That I would stand on this stage. And that I would give this to you. Robert extended the photograph towards Simon. Simon stared at it frozen. Give it to me? Why? Because on the back, he wrote something. Something he wanted you to read. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Simon climbed onto the stage. The audience erupted again, this time in shock. Judges didn't climb onto the stage. It wasn't done. The producers in the control room were frantically talking into headsets. But Simon didn't care. He walked across the stage to Robert Mitchell and stood directly in front of him. May I? Simon asked, gesturing to the photograph. Robert handed it over with trembling hands. Simon took it carefully, reverently. He looked at the image of Daniel Mitchell, 23 years old, dying, still managing to smile for the camera. Then Simon slowly turned the photograph over. Written on the back in slightly shaky handwriting were 5 words. Thank you for being honest. Below that, a signature, Daniel Mitchell, 2023. Simon's hand began to shake. He read the words again. And again. His jaw clenched. His eyes closed. When he opened them again, tears were streaming down his face. The legendary judge who had critiqued thousands of performers, who had built a career on brutal honesty and tough love, who rarely showed emotion on camera, was crying openly in front of 2,000 people and millions watching at home. Robert, Simon said, his voice breaking. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Robert replied gently. Daniel just wanted you to know that your honesty mattered. That when you told people the truth, even when it was hard to hear, it meant something. That you made this show real. And real was what he needed when everything else felt like it was falling apart. Simon looked down at the photograph again. At Daniel's smile. At those 5 words written on the back. Did he? Simon stopped, composing himself. Did he have a favorite golden buzzer moment? Robert smiled through his tears. Yes. Season 14. The cancer survivor who danced. You gave her the golden buzzer and you said. Robert closed his eyes, reciting from memory. Sometimes the greatest act of talent is simply refusing to give up. Daniel had that quote written on a card taped to his hospital bed. The nurses told me he'd read it every morning. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. Simon stood there on the stage, holding the photograph of a young man he'd never met but who had watched him, believed in him, found hope in him. The weight of that, the responsibility of that, seemed to settle on his shoulders in real time. He turned to face the audience. 2,000 faces looking back at him. All crying. All silent. All waiting. "I've been doing this for 20 years," Simon said, his voice carrying through the theater even without a microphone. "I've seen thousands of acts. I've pressed the golden buzzer for dancers, singers, acts that moved me or impressed me. But I've never—" He stopped, looking down at the photograph again. "I've never understood the weight of it. The responsibility. What it means to people who are watching from hospital beds, from difficult places, from moments when they need to believe that excellence still matters. That truth still matters." He looked at Robert. "Your son taught me something tonight that I should have understood a long time ago. Every time I say yes or no, every time I give someone a chance or tell them the truth they don't want to hear, there's someone watching who needs that honesty. Who's building hope on whether I'm real or not." Simon walked to the golden buzzer platform. He placed Daniel's photograph down next to it carefully, reverently. "Robert, you didn't come here to perform. You came here to keep a promise to your son. But I'm going to do something anyway." Simon looked at the other judges. "Howie, Heidi, Sophia, I need you to trust me on this." All three nodded, tears on their faces. Simon turned back to Robert. "Your son gave me a gift tonight. He reminded me why I do this. Why honesty matters. Why this show matters. And I can't give him his life back. I can't undo his suffering. But I can honor his promise." Simon's hand moved to the golden buzzer. "This isn't for an act. This is for a life lived with courage." For a young man who watched this show from a hospital bed and still believed in hope. For a father who loved his son enough to stand on this stage and share his grief with the world. Simon slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded across the stage. The audience leaped to their feet, screaming, crying, applauding. The other judges stood at their desk, hands over their hearts. Terry Crews rushed onto the stage and wrapped both Robert and Simon in an embrace. Robert fell to his knees, sobbing. Simon knelt beside him, still holding Daniel's photograph, and wrapped his arms around this grieving father while gold rained down on them both. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. When the confetti finally stopped falling, Simon helped Robert to his feet. The audience was still standing, still applauding, the sound echoing through the Dolby Theater like thunder. Simon took the microphone from Terry Crews. His voice was raw, unsteady, but determined. "I need to say something," Simon announced. The audience quieted immediately. "Robert, I want you to know that this photograph, Daniel's photograph, is going to stay with me. Not in a drawer. Not in storage. I'm going to keep it in my dressing room. Every night before I walk out to judge, I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to remember why this matters." He turned to the cameras, speaking directly to America. If you're watching this from a hospital bed, if you're fighting something that feels impossible, if you're the parent of someone who's struggling, Daniel's message is for you too. Be honest. Be real. Don't give up on excellence just because life is hard. That's what he taught me tonight. Robert reached out and gripped Simon's hand. He would have loved this moment. "Thank you?" "No," Simon said firmly, shaking his head. "Thank you? Thank you for being brave enough to come here. Thank you for keeping your promise. And thank you for raising a son who understood that honesty and hope aren't opposites. They're the same thing." The two men embraced again, this time longer, two strangers connected by grief and gratitude and the memory of a young man neither would ever forget. After the show, Simon had Daniel's photograph professionally preserved and framed. True to his word, it hangs in his dressing room at every show he judges. Before each taping, he touches the frame once, a ritual, a reminder, a promise of his own. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. 3 months after that night, Robert Mitchell received a letter from Simon Cowell. Inside was a donation to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society made in Daniel's name. The amount was never disclosed, but the foundation later announced it was the largest single donation they'd ever received from an individual. The letter also contained one sentence, written in Simon's own handwriting. "I will never forget his honesty. Or yours." Today, when Simon gives someone a golden buzzer, he sometimes closes his eyes for just a moment first. Audience members who pay close attention say he's mouthing something silently. Those who knew the story recognize the words. "Thank you for being honest." Daniel Mitchell never got to audition for America's Got Talent. But his promise changed the show forever. And it changed the judge who everyone thought had no heart. Sometimes the most powerful performance isn't on the stage. Sometimes it's the courage to show up and tell the truth about grief, about love, about the promises we keep when keeping them costs us everything.